Shango Mojuba ile Shango Oniwalo Eri jaja Orisha oko Erumole Shango Mojuba ile Iwaloba Kuso Amabu Shango ye 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 Abajagba emi oba kuso 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 Ariwa ariwa ye Ariwo ariwo ye Ariwa ariwa ye Ariwo ariwo ye Abajagba emi oba kuso Abajagba emi oba kuso Abajagba emi oba kuso Abajagba emi oba kuso Amabu Shango ye Amabu Shango ye Amabu Shango ye Amabu Shango ye Abajagba emi oba kuso Abajagba emi oba kuso Abajagba emi oba kuso Abajagba emi oba kuso Ariwo ariwo ye Ariwo ariwo ye Ariwo ariwo ye Ariwo ariwo ye Abajagba emi oba kuso Abajagba emi oba kuso Abajagba emi oba kuso Abajagba emi oba kuso Ariwo ariwo ye Ariwo ariwo ye Ariwo ariwo ye Ariwo ariwo ye Abajagba emi oba kuso 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 Abajagba emi oba Ọba Kuso Alado Kaiba Yaro Laroye. 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 Ọba Kuso Alado Kaiba Yaro Laroye.
Mic check. Mic check, mic check. All right. Greetings, family. Greetings, 10-9 Mwadi. Mwadi Mokolo Kolo, Kazabazo Mokolo, 10-9 Mwadi. Yeah, man. I haven't been live for a little while still. So giving thanks and praises for all those who have decided to join me for this particular, occasion. So I want to say greetings, Afeshiapa, to one and all, which is New Year's greetings in the Chi language. And earlier this year, I learned the term Bon Combat, which in Haitian Creole means happy fighting. Yeah, because the brothers and sisters who are fighting in Haiti said that the New Year blessing should reflect, the condition of the people and the mission that the people need to be on right about now. So I'd like to know if I can be heard, if possible. Yeah, I think I can. But if I can be heard, I beg somebody give me a signal. Yeah, signal in the chat. Yeah, in the live chat. And we'll see how it goes. All right. You know what I mean? So, and I'm gonna explain the reason why we're here today. Yeah, the reason why we're here today. But please give me a signal so I know that I'm not talking to myself. Somebody, anybody, everybody scream. And we'll go into the thing nice and easy. All right. But yeah, big up yourself for tuning in, and feel free to share the link to this far and wide. Yeah, far and wide. All right. So whilst I'm waiting for that signal, I'll continue. Okay, give thanks. I can be heard. All right. So I want to explore. Like I said, I have been live for a little while. I ain't posted no videos for a little while, but I had an opportunity to have a debate yesterday on the topic: are the Abrahamic religions African? Yeah, or are the Abrahamic religions African religions? Yeah. So that's what we were discussing yesterday. I was arguing that they are not. And I was debating a brother called Maku, also known as the Nuwapian sniper. And he was on the other side arguing that they were or are. The debate was hosted on the platform run by Brother Jedi, yeah, who's well known in the UK Speakers Corner community, and he runs the channel called Triluminati Live. Yeah, Triluminati Live. The link to the debate is in the chat. Sorry, the description to this video. But I'm made to understand that Brother Jedi has made it members only content. Yeah, which is his prerogative. It's his channel. So unless you join the channel, you won't be able to watch the debate, at least for now. Yeah. But I want to say respect to Brother Jedi, Maku, Nwapi, and Sniper. They were judges. Respect to them, all the brothers and sisters who tuned in, asked questions and gave feedback. Yeah. And what I wanted to do, yeah, today is just kind of explore my approach, yeah, to this question. All right. I don't really want to rehash the debate itself, yeah. But more go through my own presentation and explore my approach and why I approached it in the way that I did. Yeah. The judges scored the debate. I think it was 2-1 in my favor. So technically I was the winner of the debate. But I'll be honest, I wasn't really overly concerned with winning or losing. Yeah. That wasn't really why I engaged in the debate. As I said during the conversation itself, during the debate itself, my main focus was to approach the conversation from the perspective of African spirituality. And this is because there is an overabundance of conversation in the religious sphere that privileges and prioritizes Abrahamic religions, and that doesn't consider the African spiritualist perspective. And if you know me, then you know that that's what I'm about, yeah? And so the challenge for me was to try and relay information that focused and centered around the African worldview, all right? African spiritualist perspective within the context of that debate to an audience, which is most audiences, that is generally not familiar, yeah, with African spirituality, Kimoyo, African philosophy, and them kind of things there. All right. And so that was the reason why I entered the debate. Yeah. And to answer, sorry, big up Mayels, yeah, or Myels, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. And big up Trigger Happy. As far as I'm aware, the debate has been made members only, yeah. So I don't know if you can petition Brother Jedi via his community page, yeah, to make it available to you all. But what you will get today, however, is my side of the argument at the very least, yeah. Brother Maku's argument essentially centered around the idea that all of the religions come from Kemet, yeah. And so by virtue of the fact that they come from Kemet, they are African religions. I'm obviously oversimplifying his argument because it also has elements of the fact that a lot of the Bible takes place in Kemet or other parts of Africa, and the idea that the Middle East is Africa itself. Yeah. So I'm gonna, if anybody wants to come live, yeah, feel free. I'm gonna share the link for this in a second. And we can have a bit of a conversation. I'm not going to share it right now, yeah. But if anybody actually wants to join this conversation and explore this issue, then feel free to do so. And yeah, like I said, share out the link here. Yeah. So even though I was declared victor in the debate setting, I don't think I was necessarily on best form, like if I'm judging my own self, yeah. And the primary reason for that is that I had a lot, yeah. I had a lot down, and it was just a lot to get through within the 20 minutes that was allotted for the first main arguments, if that makes sense. And so because of that, a lot of things were rushed. And what I don't like about that is that it kind of leaves the door open for misunderstanding, and to be quite frank, mischievous misrepresentation. It's important. These issues are bigger than just a debate and who wins, yeah. And so I think that it's important to provide clarity, yeah, where possible, in situations like those. All right, so that's really what I want to do today, family. And so thank you for joining me. I just want to explore the arguments a little piece more. All right, and I'm gonna go through my presentation a little bit slower, well, a lot slower to be quite frank, and we'll see where we go from there. All right, so in doing so, at different points, I'll be explaining my approach as well, because I realize and I understand that my approach may not be conventional. Yeah, my approach may not be conventional. And I am often critical of brothers and sisters who are in African spiritual traditions and or favor African spiritual traditions and systems, understanding that not everybody who favors an African spiritual system is necessarily a practitioner, yes, an adherent of a specific African spiritual system, but has a general affinity and dedication to the restoration of dignity, yeah, to African spiritual systems. All right, but I have a critique whereby, through my observation, I find that a lot of us tend to focus on critiquing and debating Abrahamic religions rather than teaching African spirituality, yeah, rather than sharing information about African spiritual systems, yeah, and the philosophy and the ideas within African spiritual systems and African philosophy. All right. So if anybody who's listening heard the debate yesterday and wants to join, the link will be here for you later on. I heard that there has been a full review on Triluminati Live today. And I heard that a lot of people were going in on Shakara, which is all good. That was, to be expected. You know what I'm saying, and these things, yeah. I even heard that some of what was said was bordering, if not fully delving into disrespect. But whether that's true or not, I won't be doing that today. Yeah, I won't be doing that today. I have nothing negative to say about my brothers who engaged in the debate or anybody that was listening for that matter, in spite of my disagreements. Yeah, so we're not gonna engage in a foolishness, all right, tonight. All right, that's not what we're here for, and so we're not gonna do that. So I'm gonna take you through the vibes, yeah, and then we'll see where we go from there. So hit the like button, family, as you come through. It's the first time I've been live in a long time, and it's definitely the first time I'm live for this year when I'm caught at 2022. All right. So I thank you for joining me, and we're gonna get into this now. All right, blessings, blessings, blessings. Big up yourself, Nanifa. Big up yourself, Leo B. Venzen. Big up yourself, A. Zinger. And we're gonna get into this now. All right. So this is how I started the debate.
Shango, Mojuba, Shango. Eri jaja, orishako, erumole, Shango, Ojuba, ele, waloba, kuso.
Now, the interesting thing, yeah, because I wasn't watching the chat during the debate, right? But what I heard, yeah, and I haven't been able to review this because see it for myself, because I'm not able to watch it, right? But I heard, yeah, that when that played, a lot of people in the chat were saying things like, he's casting spells, yeah? He's working voodoo on us. Yeah. and sorry, it's funny. So yeah, we did hear say, them kind of thing did I go on, yeah, and there was a lot of disparaging, yeah, of the praise song that Mama Ella Ando is singing there. Now, because I didn't explain this in the debate, I'm going to explain this now, yeah. It's part of the shegri that was going on in the chat, all right. But that suggests something and proves a point that I was making throughout the debate, right? But I played that to open. Now, this is Mama Ella Andel. Yeah, for those who are unaware, Mama Ella Andel is an African born and raised in the island of Trinidad. She is a Calypso monarch, yeah, and she is also an Orisha practitioner, yeah, in the island of Trinidad. She's one of the leaders, yeah, of the Ifa community in the island of Trinidad. And so she has a number of albums that are dedicated to different Orisha. Yeah, Orisha are the principles and divinities that represent natural forces and principles for human development. Okay, and so Shango, yeah, is the Orisha, yeah, that represents thunder, lightning, fire. In some instances, he's also said to represent leadership, statehood, politics. Yeah, he's also the Orisha of drum and dance, especially in the masculine element of drum and dance. And so the term Mojuba is honor. Yes, it's honor and praise. And so this is a praise song for Shango, yeah, that she was presenting in that particular chant. Yeah, and so people not knowing what it meant, and I heard people say I heard that people have said that they as well as the witchcraft that I was working, yeah, the obeah and the voodoo, yeah, that I was working on the people them, yeah, the spell that I was casting on the people them for playing that. Some people covered their ears out of fear that the chant might bewitch their souls. Yeah, it's a beautiful song, and I'm minded by the fact that if I had played a song from any other tradition, I doubt highly that I would have gotten that reaction. So there's something about Africans chanting in African languages, yeah, in praise of concepts that come from African spiritual systems that seems to scare people. All right, and and this is like I doubt if I did like a Buddhist chant, because there are chants in Buddhism. If there's chants in Sikhi, yeah, I doubt that people would be covering their ears and talking about its witchcraft, these working spell upon people. But it just goes to show how African spiritual systems are characterized, and knowing that is partly the reason why I started with that. But it was also because I'm a spiritualist, and so we open with a spiritual dedication and invocation. I also open by saying Tendai Mwari, which in the Shona language of Zimbabwe means be thankful unto the Creator. I said Kuzai Mudzimu Mukulu, which is giving praises unto our great ancestors. I said Mojuba, Oludumare, Mojuba, Egungun, Mojuba, Orisha, yeah, which is simply just giving praises unto the Creator of the universe, the divine forces of nature, yeah, and also the ancestors, right? And so just opening a couple different African languages. The second African language there is Yoruba, and so demonstrating in the midst of the presentation there is a unity, yeah, within African spiritual systems in terms of who we praise, how we praise, and why we praise. And so that was the reason why I opened in that way. And I understand that, well, because of the Abrahamic inclination, people heard that and thought that I was casting spells upon people. All right. So if that was your inclination, then so be it. You know what I'm saying? You're entitled to your opinion. Having said that, I personally never said anything insulting or derogatory or disparaging about Abrahamic religions, yeah, in the debate. And there were some things that were said in all due honesty, and this is not a slight against Brother Nuwapi Sniper or Brother Maku, but there were some, and I said this in the debate, so it's not new news, but there were some things that he said that I found to be disparaging and denigrating to African spiritual systems. But yeah, it wasn't something that I personally was inclined to engage in. I don't feel like in order to have a debate, yeah, to have a debate, I need to be insulting or disparaging. And so in spite of whether I felt that that was done in relation to African spiritual systems, I was not going to engage in that kind of thing. Big up, Brother Jacob. Is there a canon that's with African spiritual systems? That's a good question, and that kind of relates to where I'm going to go with this in a sec, right? So you might just be patient, and we're going to get there, okay? All right. So I also began by invoking the Pan-African spirit, and this may have added to right after that in the Shango praise. When I say invoking the Pan-African spirit, people might have been running from their screen at this point. All right. Sorry, I genuinely find this funny. But yeah. But the point I was emphasizing here is that religious debate can have a divisionary impact upon African people. And I, as an African spiritualist, as an adherent of Kimoyo, and I will explain Kimoyo later on, as an adherent of Al-Kebula Liberty, which is the spiritual order of the Al-Kebula Revivalist movement, in which I was born, it was important for me to set a foundation, yeah, that makes it clear that I am not fighting against my brothers and sisters in Abrahamic religions, yeah, that I work with brothers and sisters in Abrahamic religions. And in as much as we debate and we have differences, we have those differences in the spirit of love and Pan-African unity. And so it was important for me to affirm that, because people can often be sensitive, yeah, about religious issues. And so I wanted to bring that energy into the conversation. All right. So big up the Orthodox more. Thank you for joining me. Yeah, everybody, it's the first time I've been live in a while. It's the first time I've been live this year as well. But I'm just relating to the debate that I had yesterday on True Illuminati Live. You won't be able to watch it because you have to become a member. Yeah, unless you're a member, sorry, should I say. So do join. Yeah, do join the brothers' channel and check out the debate and other membership what's it called, content that he has on the channel, right? So we invoke the Pan-African spirit. Yeah. Then I wanted to establish the context, yeah, and I established the context by exploring two statements, yeah, and the first statement is African traditional religions, which is how they are often referred to popularly. I don't tend to use this terminology, but it is a popular terminology used here. ATR, African traditional religions, are pagan, heathen, kuffar, shirk, demonic, and devil worship. All right, and this is a dominant point of view in the world in relation to African spiritual systems. Yeah, particularly perpetuated by the institutions and the people who founded and developed Abrahamic religions, as well as Africans who are in Abrahamic religions. Yeah, the dominant viewpoint is that indigenous African spiritual systems are pagan, heathen, kuffar, shirk, demonic, devil worship. And the first four of these words are to be found in the religious text, yeah, of the Abrahamic religions. Okay, there is a lot of talk referring to pagan, heathen, kuffar, and shirk. Yeah, and so throughout history, we have seen that African spiritual systems have been labeled, yeah, in this way. And we don't argue that African spiritual systems are the only traditions that have been labeled in this way. That would be a false claim, yeah. However, it would also be true to say that African spiritual systems, no spiritual systems, have been more demonized, yeah, stigmatized and marginalized as a result of being labeled in this way than the indigenous spiritual systems of African people. All right. And so I wanted to highlight this statement and compare it to the following statement. Abrahamic religions are not African. Yeah. Abrahamic religions are not African. This is the second statement. All right. And I'm suggesting that this statement should not be controversial. Yeah. Well, first of all, I asked the question, if you were to assess, yeah, these two statements, yeah, which would you say has the most gravity? Which would you say carries the most weight? Which would you say carries the most consequences, yeah, in the minds of the people that make the statement? Which one do you think stigmatizes, demonizes, and denigrates more? Yeah. And it's obviously a rhetorical question, or you can feel free to answer it, because the answer should be obvious, right? The answer really should be obvious, yeah. And I ventured to suggest that if Abrahamic religions had been replaced with Buddhism or Sikhi, yeah, or Hindu, if African spirituals, if Abrahamic religions here had been replaced with the indigenous spiritual systems of the native peoples, the indigenous peoples of the Americas, yeah. If we were to say that Buddhism is not an African religion, if we were to say that Sikhi is not an African religion, or you know, any of those, yeah, are not an African religion, very few people would have an issue with that. Very few people would find it controversial, and very few people would disagree. And you may find that you may come across some who would actually, in fact, disagree, right? I get that. I appreciate that. Some may, you know, may make a claim and so on and so forth. But it wouldn't be a controversial statement to make. And so if, yeah, brothers and sisters in Abrahamic religions feel that they are justified in saying African spiritual systems are pagan, heathen, kuffar, shirk, demonic, and devil worship, why should there be an over-emotional response, as though one is being disrespected when it is said that Abrahamic religions are not African? This appears to me to be an imbalance reasoning, yeah, especially given the context for the conversation, which is the imposition of Abrahamic religions on African people. And in the context of that imposition, the denigration of African people, the very beingness of African people, yeah, remembering that in the religious texts, yeah, of scholars and institutional leaders of various religions, the African has been characterized as not having a soul. And so therefore the culture, yes, and in the context of the culture, the spiritual systems of African people have been denigrated as an expression of the lack of humanity of the African in general. And so many of us felt, and it was told to us, that in order to approach the pale of humanity, we had to discard that culture, reject it, and disavow our spiritual systems in order to adopt the spiritual systems that were brought to us by those who enslaved us, okay, and oppressed and colonized and invaded and so on and so forth. All right. And so many of us and many Africans, yeah, who were indoctrinated and adherents to these religions, many, not all, but many who were indoctrinated or adherents to these religions were actually perpetuated that particular understanding. So I wanted to highlight this imbalance, and I hope brothers and sisters appreciate that. Okay. And again, highlighting with all due love and respect for my brothers and sisters. So I emphasize the fact that I was going to approach the debate from a Kimoyo perspective. Yeah, Kimoyo is a phrase that many of us, yeah, coming out of the work of Baba Kim Wandende Kiabunseki Fukiao, who is the author of many books, including African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo, Self-Healing, Power and Therapy, Mbongi, Kindezi, The African Art of Babysitting, which is the first book that I read from him. And Mbongi is an African political institution, etc. Yeah, and so he's done a lot of work in terms of documenting. He's an initiate into Bakongo spiritual systems, yeah, and initiatory practices, and he is documenting the philosophical and ideological and spiritual foundations of these initiatory systems and how they feed into disciplines, yeah, that we need in our everyday life: politics, economics, therapy, yeah, counseling, child rearing, etc., 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 etc. All right, and so he uses this term Kimoyo to define the African spiritual systems, yeah. And we are one of the reasons why we adopt this terminology is partly because we understand that the term African spirituality has its limitations. Terms like traditional African religion, African spiritual systems, African wisdom traditions, and so on and so forth, they have their limitations, all right? And so we seek words and terms within African languages that have significance in many African languages in order to display and give explanation of what this means, yeah, what we are getting at when we say African spirituality. Yeah, it's a stage in a process. We're reconstituting and redeveloping and re-evolving and restoring pride and dignity to our indigenous spiritual systems in the context of the hyper denigration of them. Yeah, and so this is all a process. And so Kimoyo is a phrase that is being used more and more. And just to give a brief explanation, this slide is actually out of place. Yeah, I'll put it here now just as a placeholder so you have a bit of an understanding of what Kimoyo is, all right, or means. Yeah, the terminology itself. Yeah. Because many of you might just think, because you might have watched Black Panther or you read two Black Panther comics, Marvel, that the term Kimoyo is Marvel. Yeah, it's from Black Panther. It's not. It's a legitimate Kikonga terminology. Yeah. And so brothers and sisters who are from Southern Africa or East Africa or Central Africa will know the term Moyo. Yeah. And Moyo, as it says here, means vital power. This vital power, Moyo, came to exist on earth after Futu, the container of something secret or of great price, yeah, was completely tied up. The Futu and its contents were there ready to secure life to be born on earth. Yeah, Moyo in this language, Kikongo, is a universal matter. It is something both inside and outside. Moyo is what is the vitality of life. It is the key word to Kibantu, the Bantu way of life, their philosophy. Kimoyo, vitalism, is their religion, not animism. And so you can see that he's challenging this characterization, yeah, of African spiritual systems being animism, yeah, worship animals, right? It's false. What we're talking when he says vitalism, he's referring to the idea that African spiritual systems live in reverence and honor of a divine creation that is considered and conceptualized as a complete whole. And so our way of life, yeah, is centered around living in harmony, yeah, with the cosmos as a whole, because the cosmos as a whole is a manifestation of the vital power, and that vital power is the creator. Yeah, that vital power is the creator, and because that vital power is the creator, the universe itself is the creator. Existence itself is the creator. All that is the creator. All right, and so we go into this a little bit more later on, so I won't dwell on it here, but I've inserted, this was not originally in this presentation, all right, for yesterday's debate, but I've inserted it right now. It's the only slide that I've inserted, just so I can explain it here for you at this particular moment in time. Okay, but I was emphasizing the fact that I'm going to be speaking from an African spiritual perspective. So that means I'm not simply going to be dwelling on Abrahamic religions. The question is, are Abrahamic religions African religions? And so it's important for me in a conversation like that to have a definition of what African religions are. Yeah, because we know what Abrahamic religions are. We know that they're Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. We know that. We know that that these religions are called Abrahamic because the patriarch of their orders is considered to be a man called Abraham or Ibrahim. Yeah. And so we understand that, but very few people understand what African spirituality is, understand what what religion is from an African perspective, what Kimoyo is, yeah, and many would even try to deny it, yes, and reject the idea that there is a concept called African spirituality or Kimoyo. And so it was important for me to approach the conversation from that perspective and make it clear, because as I said already, many of us in African spiritual systems spend too much time simply debating Abrahamic religions and not teaching about African spirituality and African spiritual systems. All right. And I'm minded by the fact that it may be more, many brothers and sisters in Abrahamic religions will prefer you to debate Abrahamic religions rather than to teach and explain and expose people to African spiritual systems, their concepts, their rituals, their practices, and the meanings behind them. All right. So that's the point of this. So the next stage here is that I wanted to differentiate, yeah, between what I'm calling African religion or African spiritual systems and the idea that of religions with African influences and religions with African expressions. All right. So what do I mean by this? Yeah. Again, we have to understand that there's nuances in a conversation like this. Yeah, in a conversation like this. All right. So it's not that you're either in an African spiritual system or you are not. Yeah, it's not simply that. All right. There's variations here. All right. So we have indigenous African spiritual systems. All right. Then we have religions that were influenced by indigenous African spiritual systems. Yeah. Then we have religions that are not at their root African, but that within them, Africans have found ways of expressing Africanness within the context of the religion. Okay, I'm going to come back to the question, Jilla, about what Ubuntu is, or what the Ubuntu principle is. But in short, we're dealing with, well, on one level, it's a social philosophy in terms of people relations. Yeah, a person is a person because there are people. It emphasizes group identity and what's the word? Group identity in the context of shared responsibility and collective development. On another level, the Ubuntu principle is about our connectedness to the universe. Untu is a similar concept to Moyo. Yeah, it's vital power. It's the pervasive energy. Yeah, that gives rise to existence. All right. And so when we say Ubuntu, we are emphasizing that we are all manifestations of the divine essence, and that our social order, yeah, in terms of harmony and collectivism, should be is derived from our understanding, yes, of our connection to the divine order. All right. Okay, so we have. So I would argue that the religious systems of Greece and Rome are religions with African influences. Yeah, they definitely had a lot of African influences in the Greco-Roman religions. Yeah, but I wouldn't consider the Greco-Roman religions African religions. Yeah, and I think very few people would. And given the fact that the Greco-Roman religions predated the Abrahamic religions, yeah. If the Greco-Roman religions are not African, and nobody, interestingly, nobody's fighting for them to be African. I don't know why the Abrahamic religions would be, and why we would need to fight for them to be African in the same kind of way. It's a very interesting dynamic, because nobody can deny that literal deities from the Nile Valley were borrowed and infused into the Greco-Roman religious system. Yeah, it's not even obscure. Right? They literally were worshipping quote unquote ISIS. Yeah, or more properly called Aset. All right, but within the context of their own culture. Yeah, so we refer to them as Greco-Roman religions, even though we understand that they had African influences. And then, as I've said, as I gave the examples yesterday in terms of religions with African expression. So in Christianity and Islam, yeah, there are very many expressions of these religions, yeah, whereby Africans have retained aspects of our culture, even aspects of our indigenous spiritual systems, yeah, and those that informs how our people practice the religion itself. Yeah. So the revivalist Baptist traditions, yeah, throughout the Americas, yeah, that we have as African people, yeah, the revivalist Baptist traditions, you see when them go out the river and them are wear white, yeah, and them dipping out the river and the pure drum beating and rhythm and all them something there. These are African expressions, yeah, within the practice of a Christian religion that uses the Bible and calls on Jesus and so on and so forth. Yeah, but the culture behind it, the rhythm behind it, and the emphasis on being possessed by the Holy Spirit, for example, is particularly African. Yeah, but the religion is still Christianity, right? It's there with and we have to look at how those expressions came into existence in the first place. Anyway, as another example, and many of us coming out of a Christianized perspective often fail to appreciate the extent to which that same reality exists in Islam. Yeah. So we have, for example, the Maulid, yeah, movement in Senegal and Mali, yeah, and there are other related movements, yeah, and then you have the Baye Fall, yeah, who they retain significant elements of the ancestor veneration, yeah, that preceded their practice of Islam within their expressions of Islam. All right. And so I wouldn't consider that to be a whole African religion, but it certainly retains many elements of African religion. And they use African expressions, yeah, and even African understandings. A lot of the Sufi sects, yeah, within African Islam, yeah, is infused with African spiritual traditions. All right. So that's a religion with African expression. All right. But I'm considering that, for the sake of this conversation, as different to religions that are indigenously and wholly African. Right. That center African indigenous people groups and ancestors and traditions and ideas. Yes. I'm considering that as different. Yeah. From Africanized expressions of Abrahamic religions and non-African religions with African influences. All right. Right. So then I wanted to get into one argument, yeah, here, and after I've got through this section, I'll share the link, and the brothers and sisters want to come live with me, they can, yeah. And this is where I'm being self-critical now, because I had to rush through a lot of this information, rush, and I don't know if all of it landed in the way that I wanted it to, and it's probably not even possible for it to all have landed in the way that I wanted it to, because there's just too much information. However, Sorry, man, I drink some water. I wanted to dispel the geography argument, yeah? And so the geography argument is made up of two claims, yeah? The Middle East is in Africa, yeah? And the Middle East is on the African tectonic plate. And both of these statements are false, yeah? Both of these statements are false. And I'm going to explain why. I know some of you are going to disagree with me, but it's all good, yeah? A continent, yeah, this defined continent, all right? And I've taken the definition from Wikipedia because it was the most extensive one I could find. And it says, a continent is any of several large land masses, generally identified up to 7 geographical regions, are by convention, rather than any strict criteria, commonly regarded as continents. Yeah? Commonly regarded as continents. The emphasis here is by convention rather than any strict criteria. Commonly ordered from largest in area to smallest, these 7 regions are Asia, Africa, North America, South America, Antarctica, Europe, and Australia. Yeah. Now, listen, Wikipedia gets a bad rap here when you use it for things like this. It's a definition I'm using it for. It's not the depth of the scholarship. Yeah. But it is useful for giving a broad overview. Yeah, just like the encyclopedias that we use, right? It is useful for that, yeah. And so this particular Wikipedia page gives examples of the developments of arguments in terms of what is a continent. Because when we were at school, we were taught that a continent is a landmass that is a large landmass with various different countries that is surrounded by water. But that definition doesn't hold to weight when you consider that most of these land masses are not surrounded completely by water. They're connected to other land masses. Yeah, North America and South America are connected, right? Africa, Asia, and Europe are connected. Yeah. But so why are they considered separate continents? Because this is by convention rather than any strict criteria. Yeah. So the reality is, and maybe the point that I didn't get to make clearly yesterday, right, is that a continent is a very new concept. Yeah, a continent is not an ancient concept. Ancient people did not have a concept of continent. Yeah, and so when things are arbitrarily, yeah, or by convention rather than strict criteria identified, it allows anybody to throw what they want on the thing. Yeah, but really, in fact, I'm gonna come back to that statement. Yeah, so I went here, and if you can see my cursor. Right, I wanted to highlight the fact that people are concerned with this area right here, yeah, the Middle East. All right, the Middle East is everything from Arabia, yeah, going to Iran. Now, if you was to Google it, yeah, Israel right here, and Jordan would be considered Asia. Yeah, it's politically speaking considered to be a part of Asia. Yeah, but my question for the people then is based upon the idea that this area, the Middle East, is considered to be Africa because of the connection to this strip of land. Yeah, all right. So this is Africa, yeah, based upon this connection right here. Okay, why are we stopping at Iran? Yeah. Why are we stopping at Iran? Why are we not going to Pakistan and Afghanistan and Tajikistan and India? Why is India not a part of Africa then? Yeah. Why is Turkey not a part of Africa? Bulgaria, Italy, Spain, and Portugal. Why are these places not a part of Africa if we're going to be consistent with this argument about connection to landmass? It's because it's not defined by simply connection to landmass. Why is Europe and Asia considered to be 2 different continents when they share more land, yeah, than does the border between Kemet or Egypt and Israel? Yeah, but generally, and nobody argues, right, with this, yeah, in terms of Asia and Europe being considered different continents. I shouldn't say nobody argues, because there is a push towards developing supercontinents, and some of those supercontinents include the Afro Afro-Eurasian continent, yeah, and so on and so forth, and considering the American continent as all of the North, South, and Central America, and so on and so forth. Those arguments are being made, but generally speaking, especially among African people, Black people, we're not arguing about whether Asia is Europe and Europe is Asia or not, and whether they should be considered different continents or not, and them kind of things there. So I'm just highlighting the fact that this argument about the Middle East being in Africa is purely political, right? It's designed to challenge or neutralize the argument that has been put forward for a generation at least now, yeah, by Africans who are challenging Abrahamic supremacy, challenging Abrahamic propaganda and hyper denigration of African spiritual systems. When Africans begin to affirm African spiritual system in the context of being African and being proud of being African, and they challenge the validity of Abrahamic religions in relation to African people based upon the fact that these religions have been the tools, yes, through which our indigenous spiritual systems have been denigrated, then the argument to neutralize that is, well, Israel's in Africa, Mecca and Medina is in Africa, yeah, and these kinds of things. And I'm saying that that argument is political. It's not based upon anything geographical, yeah, or you know what I'm saying, or any strict criteria. It's based upon trying to validate a particular religious perspective, yeah, and you're allowed to do that. Yeah, you're allowed to do that based upon the fact that there's no strict criteria, right? You're allowed to do that, but I'm just want to highlight the intentions, yeah, behind it. All right. Okay. The next argument is, okay, so we're looking at this now, and I'm highlighting here that these are the peoples, yeah, of the Bible, yeah, the Semitic peoples of the Bible, or at least some of them, as referred to, and that make up the majority of the story in relation to peoples, yeah, in the Abrahamic scriptures. Okay, so you see here the Phoenician, the Ammonites, the Hebrew, the Moabite, the Edomite, the Nabatean, Akkadian, the Aramaic, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so these are the areas that. And all of this as well encompasses the holy lands, the sacred lands, yeah, of the followers of Abrahamic religion. So we're talking about Israel, you know, Jordan, Mecca, Medina, and a few others that I know that I'm obviously forgetting. But we're also talking about Canaan and Babylon and so on and so forth. And I'm not sure that there's consensus, yeah. In fact, there's certainly not consensus on exactly where all of these lands are supposed to be and where they are and where they were, and even Israel, yeah, there's not a consensus. What's it called? Contrary to popular belief, that what is called the state of Israel today was actually located. And I'm talking from the perspective of Abrahamics now. Yeah, was actually located where it's said to be located today, right? Around that, yeah. So even when people say Israel is in Africa, like even that is not conclusive. Yeah, not coming from Shakara, but based upon people that practice the Abrahamic religion, in particular Jews and non-Zionist Jews. Yeah, they don't regard the landmass that is considered to be Israel today as the real Israel. So that's not a question. Yeah, but we're highlighting that this is where the lands operate, and so that is why the use of this Israel and the Middle East as an Africa argument is so vociferous, and that's why they don't go beyond Iraq, because they're not concerned with anything beyond Iraq, and sometimes they don't even go beyond Iran. Yeah, I'm going to get into this in a second. Sorry, they don't go beyond Iraq sometimes. Yeah, and if they do, they go to Iran and they stop there. But because Mesopotamia is considered to be in the Iraq region, for some reason they want to connect Mesopotamia to the Semitic religions. And I think that's a flawed argument, and we're going to get into that in a second. Right, so the tectonic plate argument I was highlighting here is the fact that they say that the Middle East is on the African tectonic plate, and it's not. Yeah. Now, as I said yesterday, you may get away with Israel. Yeah, we accept that. You may get away with Israel as it is currently positioned. Again, highlighting the fact that it is not conclusive that this particular area is what the ancient Israelites considered to be Israel, if there ever was an Israel in history, because that is also up for question. Okay, but being fair in terms of coming from an Abrahamic perspective, not all of them agree that that is Israel. Yeah, but for argument's sake, let's say that that is Israel. Yeah, this piece of land right Yasso, yeah, just east of Egypt. Yeah, that is on the African tectonic plate. That is a fact. Yeah, that is on the African tectonic plate, and the African tectonic plate is this border right here. Yeah, all right. Then Arabia had its own plate. So the majority of these lands, yeah, look, going back to this one, yeah, everything east of Yasso, yeah, is on, and it's possible that even a piece of Jordan, but I think mostly not, yeah. So is on the Arabian tectonic plate. So now the Middle East, yeah, the Middle East is not in on the African tectonic plate, right? The Middle East is not on the African tectonic plate. So I'm and this is not, because I'm not really judging Africa and what is African simply by geographical borders, or tectonic plates. I'm highlighting an argument that has been presented to me and saying, well, the arguments are not factual. Simply what I'm doing, yeah. But what is African, or what constitutes an African religion to me, is not confined by the borders of Africa, however we define them, yeah, or the borders of tectonic plates, however we define them, yeah. That's not the standard. It's a consideration, but it's not the standard, yeah, that we're dealing with, all right? And I hope you're bearing that in mind, because we're going to come back to these matters right here. And also highlighting the fact that this split between, because the Arabian tectonic plate and the African tectonic plate, as far as geologists are concerned, was actually one plate, tectonic plate, back in the day. When we say back in the day, we're talking about 20 million years ago. Yeah. Now, some people in Abrahamic religions, and I don't say this to be insulting, but it's the fact that some people in Abrahamic religions believe that the Earth or the cosmos is between 7,000 and 8,000 years old. Yeah. Now, if you are one such person, these tectonic plates were never together. They were never unified, as far as you're concerned. Yeah. That never happened. All right. Okay. Right. So now. This was a throwaway point, but it was just to highlight the fact that the makeup, yeah, and bearing in mind, you know, a lot of brothers and sisters that make the argument about tectonic plates are the same brothers and sisters who deny that the Earth is round, and are fond of challenging, let's say, conventional geological arguments, you know, or understandings about the nature of the planet Earth, yeah. But somehow they believe that the Earth is flat, and that the people them have fabricated, yeah, all of these conceptions of the Earth being a sphere and so on and so forth. But they were correct about the tectonic plates, yeah. So everything else they said was rubbish, yeah. But the tectonic plate argument is good. So I was simply highlighting from this book. And I didn't really go into this yesterday, but because I've got time now, I'm gonna do so, just to say that from this book, Earth Structure, an Introduction to Structural Geology, there is a concern at the moment because there is said to be a split here in the African tectonic plate. All right, that they say, I'll just read it. Eastern Africa, when viewed from space, looks like it has been slashed by a knife for numerous ridges, bounding deep gash-like throws, traverse the landscape from north to south. Yeah, you can see the figure there, all right? The landscape comprises the East African Rift, a region where the continent of Africa is quite literally splitting apart. Land lying on the east of the rift moves, yeah, ever so slowly to the east, relative to the land lying on the west side of the rift. If this process were to continue for another 10 to 20 million years, and a new ocean would form between the two land masses. Initially, this ocean would resemble the Red Sea, which now separates the Arabian Peninsula from Africa. Eventually, the ocean could grow to be as wide as the Atlantic or wider. Bearing in mind that the Arabian plate is steadily vying north, yeah, so it's splitting further away from the African continent. All right, so what is considered to be the African continent. And so I'm asking, if this takes place, is everything that took place in East Africa no longer African? Yeah, if we're using the tectonic plate argument, all right, so, like, you know what I'm saying, yeah, because the tectonic plate argument is one that's being used, right? Or are they still African, or is it no longer part of Africa? Or you know what I'm saying? This is a question putting out there for those who use this argument. All right. Bigging up Lady Spade, bigging up Gila Ansar, bigging up Soul Hunter. Yeah, I hear you, Soul Hunter. It's all good. Those who are upset can be upset. They're entitled to their upsetness, you know. But yeah, we're not disparaging nobody today. I'm trying to explore my approach to the debate and the conversation. All right. And if those who are upset get some armor from it, then that's fine. Yeah, arm yourselves. Good. Yeah. And so the second argument I wanted to address, but they were black, and this is the idea that the founders, yeah, all of the founders of the Abrahamic religions are black. This is the Hebrews, yeah, the Jews, and the Arabs, yeah, in particular, yeah. These people are black people. This is what they're saying. All right. Okay. So. And a number of times in the debate yesterday, it was said that I said that these people are Europeans. I never said that these people are Europeans, and I'm going to clarify the argument now. Yeah. So once again, I never said that these people were Europeans, or let's say these people were exclusively Europeans. I never made that argument. All right. But let's explore the argument that I made. So we begin when we look at the blackness of the people of the areas in question that were previously mentioned, yeah, by talking about Sumer, yeah. And this is because for some reason, brothers and sisters in the Abrahamic religions are connecting their religion to Sumer. Somehow they believe that the idea of Sumer validates the Africanness of Semitic religions, yeah. And it's funny that whilst they're fighting for the Middle East to be in Africa, they're very, very vociferous and vehement about the fact that Sumer was the civilization older than Kemet. For some reason, this Africanness that they're on seems to feel the need to detract from the primacy of Kemet, yeah, as the cultural center, or let's say the Nile Valley, yeah, because it's not just Kemet, but Kemet because their Bible and their Quran speaks about Kemet, yeah, as the cultural center, yeah, of African civilization, in as much as Greece and Rome is the cultural center of European and Western civilization. But in the book When We Rule by Robin Walker, he explores Sumer as a black civilization, yeah, as a black civilization. And so we understand that, yeah, and so we want to go through the argument right now, yeah. Sumer was the first civilization to emerge in Asia, called Chaldea in some of the literature, and primitive or proto-Babylonian elsewhere. Yeah, bearing in mind that if this is primitive or proto-Babylonia, the Abrahamic religions also born up Babylon. That's why all of us born Babylon, right? Because Rastafari adopted the terminology from the Old Testament, yeah, in terms of burning up Babylon. All right. It was situated between the Tigris and the Euphrates valleys of southern Iraq. Yeah. The rivers played an important part in the evolution of culture, much as it did in Africa's Nile Valley. The Greeks called the region Mesopotamia. Yeah. And so this argument about Mesopotamia, this is where it's coming from, but the terminology is Greek. Now, those who, I'm going to leave that point alone, but just bear in mind that the term Mesopotamia is Greek, and nobody ever questions the term Mesopotamia. Yeah, note that point. All right, meaning the land between the rivers. From the earliest times, the Tigris and the Euphrates deposited their alluvium on beds of rocks between Arabia and Iran. And I was critical when I watched this back, because I thought maybe I could have deleted some of this text because it's not necessarily, pertinent, but it's important information nonetheless. 18 ancient city-states emerged in the region, including Inidu, Kish, Lagash, yeah, Nippur, Umma, Uruk, and Shunupak, yeah. So these are all the city-states, yeah, that emerged into the Sumerian civilization, yeah. The Sumerians were succeeded by Semitic cultures in approximately the same region, but centered towards the north. Chief among these were the Akkadians, Babylonia, and Assyria. These cultures were not contemporaneous, but followed each other in chronological fashion with long periods of overlap. All right, I'm not going to explain this now because it will become clearer a little bit later on. Sir Leonard Woolley was an Oxford-educated archaeologist. He directed excavations in Iraq for many years. In his writings, he makes dubious and contradictory claims about the ethnic origins of the Sumerians. However, he agreed that the Sumerian culture was not indigenous to Iraq, having been brought from the sea. He commented that, quote, as our excavation seems to show, yeah, there is a good deal of truth in that tradition. It was not in the Euphrates Valley that the arts were born. And although it is not likely to have been the Indus Valley of India and Pakistan either, later research may well discover some site between those two extremes where the ancestor of our Sumerians developed the first real civilization of which we have any knowledge. Yeah. So basically, what Brother Robin Walker is saying here is that archaeologists, yeah, European archaeologists, recognize that the civilization wasn't indigenous to that region. In other words, the people that built the civilization traveled there from elsewhere. However, they didn't really want to give that credit to African people. All right, let's continue. This raises the question, where does the Sumerians come from? Logic would dictate that they came from either Nubia or Egypt, on the simple ground that no other civilizations existed at that time. No other cultures had introduced writing, the sciences, the arts, or city building. In addition, Sumerian texts mention the important place names Magan, Meluha, and Dilmun. They are said to give clues to where the Sumerians came from. Again, source, Professor William J. Perry, an English scholar with a strong interest in the origin of and spread of the culture, attempted to identify these places. Quote, since the culture of Sumer came from elsewhere, whence came it? The answer usually given is that it came from the mountainous regions of Central Asia. The Sumerian story's origins, so even if like people like that put the Sumerian argument forward, suggest that these people originated in Sumeria, yeah? There's no evidence, but the evidence suggests otherwise, yeah? Sumerian stories of origins tell a very different tale. Dilmun has been identified and with some place or other in the Persian Gulf. Perhaps the Bahrain Islands, perhaps a land on the eastern shore or of the Gulf, or in any case, it was situated in the Gulf itself. With regard to Meluha and Magan, there is some dispute. In a late inscription of the Assyrians, it is said that Magan and Meluha were archaic names for Egypt and Ethiopia. Yeah. And that is the scholar, Professor William J. Perry. All right. Professor Perry himself, Robin Walker continues, identifies Meluha as Yemen and Somalia. This may indicate that the ancestors of the Sumerians originally lived in Yemen, Somalia, and also Egypt before migrating to Bahrain. From there, they migrated to Iraq, since Meluha does mean Ethiopia. As Professor Perry admits, this suggests that some of the ancestors of the Sumerians migrated from Nubia, which is the region that was considered to be Ethiopia back in the day, as well as other parts of the continent, instead of Yemen and Somalia. The rest came from Egypt. Okay. Going on to other sources, yeah. So I wanted to demonstrate that this is not just one source that is saying this. So we've mentioned 3, yeah. Robin Walker, and then Robin Walker has mentioned 2 more so far, and there are more in the book When We Ruled. Okay. In this book, Ancient Iraq, by Georges Roux, he and this is considered to be one of the authoritative texts on Sumer, yeah, as a civilization. He describes the book as a concise and in many respects incomplete study of the political, economic, and cultural history of Mesopotamia in antiquity, beginning with the first manifestations of human presence in northeastern Iraq during the Paleolithic times, and ending with ultimate collapse of the Sumerio-Akkadian civilization at the dawn of the Christian era. Yeah, bear that in mind. Yeah, he goes on later on in the book to say the Guara culture was eventually replaced by Nineveh, by the Nineveh culture. Forgive that 5 because that was supposed to be one of the references that he used. Yeah, but I forgot to delete that. Level 5 of the deep sounding at Nineveh. Yeah, characterized by a well-made, rather attractive, painted or incised pottery, and by Sumerian weapons and seals. But by that time, Sumer had already entered history, and the whole of the early dynastic period was to elapse before the first written documents appeared in the north in the wake of the Akkadian conquerors. Yeah. So what we're emphasizing here, bearing in mind, yeah, that Sumer is the first civilization in this region, the first culture, civilization in this region. Yeah, the Akkadian is the first culture and writing system for which we have records that is considered to be a Semitic, yeah, culture, language, and writing system. Yeah, and we're going to emphasize that point here. All right, so this is here because this is an illustration by National Geographic of the early migrations of human beings. It's often called the Out of Africa theory, and I know many people challenge the Out of Africa theory, but most of them do so because their Bible tells them something different and their Quran tells them something different, and they're not necessarily got enough of the evidence. It's just that they have a religious conviction and they can't agree with the Out of Africa theory. I'm not necessarily saying that there are no issues with the Out of Africa theory, but the general principle of the idea that that human beings began in the African continent and then migrated out and spread throughout the world, the rest of the planet, I don't think is overly controversial, and I'm not sure why it should be. But what I was emphasizing here is that this takes place over a period of hundreds of thousands of years. Yeah, all of the migration that you see here. Yeah, and so obviously they say that humanity begins around here. Yeah, now what they don't have here is how humans spread around the African continent, right? Generally left out. I'm going to come back to that, yeah? But we migrated out, yeah, and went to various different places. And hundreds of thousands of years later, there's a migration back into this area right here, yeah? And all of the people that migrate back, yeah, whereas all that left may have been black, and I'm using the word black advisedly, all of the people that migrate back are not necessarily, yeah, black, right? Because what's the word? Shifts in human phenotype, yeah, are a consequence of a lot of these migrations and stayings and situations and building up, you know, cultures and then moving on and so on and so forth. And if I'm correct, I didn't put when I do this again, I will add elements of the argument, yeah, of the Out of Africa theory. But if I'm correct, somewhere around Yasa or Yasa, yeah, is where the lighter skinned, yeah, phenotype, the straighter nose phenotype and the straight hair phenotype begins to predominate. And eventually some of those people migrate back into what is now called the Middle East. Yeah. So not all of them are European. All right. But and there's also migrations from up here into down here. Yeah. The Aryan people them that come from around Yasso. Yeah. And so they migrate to different places. So we're talking. This is over a period of hundreds of thousands, over 100,000 years. Let's put it that way. All right. So everybody that migrates back here, by the time we get to 3,000 years BC, everybody here is not black. Yeah. All right. No, everybody's not. Now, I'm also highlighting. Remember that the Sumer civilization was centered in the southern part of Iraq. Yeah. But the Akkadians came from north. They were centered in the north. So they came from them region around Yasso. All right, and came into Sumer. And that is the first Semitic civilization. Yeah, I hope the ones are following that as I'm moving. And I'll accept I'm not an expert on the Out of Africa theory. So if I've got any details wrong, then please feel free to correct me. You know, that's all part of the process. All right. Now, brothers and sisters, I want to make a point here which is that I really wanted to spend 10 minutes on all that I'm saying right about now. And I know you think this is ridiculous. How was you ever going to spend 10 minutes on that? I skipped out a lot. So everything that I'm reading today, I didn't read yesterday. Yeah. But I wanted to really get to the African spirituality part, which I'm going to get to shortly. So bear with me because I'm going to get there shortly. But I just want to get this argument out of the way. Yeah. So continuing in ancient Iraq, the gap opened at the end of the 4th millennium between north and south was never entirely filled in ancient history. After the Akkadians successively, the Sumerian kings of the 3rd dynasty of Ur and Hammurabi of Babylon held under their sway the upper Tigris and the foothills of Kurdistan. Yeah, bear that in mind. But Kurdistan is not in Africa, by the way, kings and queens. All right, we're not including Kurdistan. Okay, only Iraq. All right. Yet, from their inscriptions, one forms the impression that these districts were considered somewhat foreign and culturally inferior. The Hittite raid on Babylon in 1595 BC, and these are, depending on what your timeline is, this is the era in which the Semitic religions are beginning to develop, right? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? The people of Israel and so on and so forth. They're doing their thing around these times. Yeah, I don't know if it's the time of Moses or the time of Abraham. I don't know which one it is, but then they're definitely supposed to be about right during these times. And the Hittites are in fact Europeans. Yeah, the Hittites come from the Caucasus, I believe. Yeah, I could be wrong on that, but that is my recollection as it stands right about now. But do correct me if I'm incorrect. Yeah. And the long period of semi-anarchy that followed, the Kassite domination put an end to the political supremacy of the South. The North then took its revenge, and the kings of Assur and Nineveh ruled over the whole of Mesopotamia. So these Semites, yeah, there's black people there, you know, but these Semites, yeah, come in, all of them are not black. And they begin to rule over Mesopotamia. Yeah, but the Babylonians never willingly accepted the government by these barbarians and repeatedly tried to shake off the yoke, whilst the mighty monarchs of Assyria themselves, yeah, who piously collected the old Sumerian texts and regularly took part in their New Year festivals of Babylon, implicitly acknowledged their debt to a very ancient and venerable civilization. So, yeah, this is the argument here, that there's beef between Semites and the Sumerians, yeah, who are not Semites. The Sumerians are not Semites, yeah. But even among the Semites, there's some differences of opinion. Some of the Semites, yeah, acknowledge their debt to Sumer, and some don't. Some of this, yeah, may factor into the perception of Babylon. This is why people like Ubuntu Principle say, him not chart down Babylon, him chart down Rome. Yeah? Because Rome we are dealing with right now. We're not dealing with Babylon. Rome we are dealing with. Rome come in slavery and all them something there. So what I call Babylon for? Yeah, and I agree with the argument. So you tend to hear me say Rome as opposed to Babylon. All right. When any day for this section, Kings and Queens, then we're going to get to African spirituality part. It is within the limits. It is within the limits of Asia and Africa that the first civilized peoples had their development. The Egyptians in the Nile Valley, the Chaldeans in the plain of the Euphrates, they were peoples of sedentary and peaceful pursuits. Their skin was dark, the hair short and thick, the lips strong. Nobody knows their origin with exactness. Yeah, these are the early peoples now of Sumer. Nobody knows that. We've already dealt with this. Yeah, that nobody knows the origin of exactly, but we've got some suggestions about where they may come from. All right, and scholars are not agreed the name to give them. Some terming them Cushites or others Hamites, which we know in historic and religious texts are euphemisms for Africans or black people. Later, between the 20th and the 25th century BC, came bands of martial shepherds who had spread all over Europe and the west of Asia, the areas of Semites. There is no clear marked external difference. This was said in 1907, right? I would consider this to be slightly incorrect. Yeah. But it is true that the Semites and the Aryans did mix and intermingle and so on and so forth. All right. There's no clear marked difference between the Aryans and the Semites. Both are of the white race, having the oval face, regular features, regular by European standards, clear skin, abundant hair, large eyes, thin lips, and straight nose. Both people were originally nomad shepherds and fond of war. So these two things are important. Why? Because the nomadic shepherd business, yeah, the Hebrews of the scriptures are known to be nomads and shepherds. That's how they characterize themselves, and even their prophets and religious figures, yeah, as shepherds. All right. But also this fond of war business, that's important because of the instruction of the Nesut Biti Merikari, yeah, who said, of all of these people, lo, the miserable Asiatic. He is wretched because of the place he is in, short of water and bare of wood. Its paths are many and painful because of mountains. He does not dwell in one place. Food propels his legs. He fights since the time of Horus, not conquering nor being conquered. He does not announce the day of combat like a thief who darts about a group. Yeah. And so this description of them being fond of war and shepherds is and nomadic shepherds was actually relayed by Merikari, yeah, over 2,000 years BC. All right, at the same time, yeah. So we have to acknowledge that as well, that they had. So the people of ancient Kemet had an idea of who the Semites were because they had invaded. Some of them have migrated in, and some of them have left, and some of them were thrown out after various different invasions and so on and so forth. Yeah, and I'm gonna skip all of this because I believe I've made the point. All right, I'm not going to go into this for the sake of time, but this is from an article called a paper called "The Semiticization of the Arabian Peninsula." Evidently, the Semitic peoples were not always there. Yeah, and so this linguist Roger Bledge goes through a linguistic analysis of the languages in the Arabian Peninsula to try to identify, to find some ways of identifying when it became Semiticized, because it was not always Semiticized. Yeah. What I will deal with, however, is this idea of the language of the people of Sumer. This is from When We Ruled Again, but it's not Robin Wilker. This is the afterword of When We Ruled, and it's written by a linguist by the name of Fari Supia. And he says, it is often assumed that sub-Saharan Africans never migrated outside of Africa within recent prehistoric times. Yeah, so we're not talking about ancient times now. We're not talking about 100,000 years BC. We're talking about recent prehistoric times. That's like before written records. Yeah, so prior to Nubia. Yeah, so not Nubia, Tar Seti, we're properly called. The same region, but prior to Tar Seti, prior to Kemet, people assume that Africans never traveled outside of Africa. Yeah, despite this common perception, the linguist Joseph Greenberg demonstrated a genetic relationship between Semitic languages and Chadic, which includes Hausa. Cushitic includes Oromo, Somali, Amotic includes Hamar, ancient Egyptian and Berber includes Tamashek, spoken by the Tuaregs. Since all of these, and by the way, there are other African-centered scholars like Fiafala Benga and Mwabinge Belolo who would actually challenge some of this information by Joseph Greenberg here. Yeah. So I'm not going to go into that because it's above my pay grade, but I do understand some of the arguments, and from what I do understand, I agree with in the sense of the lack of validity or established validity in the concept of Afro-Asiatic as a language family. All right, but that's another subject for another time. Since all of these language families are spoken in Africa, and only Semitic is spoken both in Africa and Asia, the logical conclusion has been that at some point within the last 10,000 years, the ancestors of Semitic peoples left Africa and entered Asia. The question thus arises as to whether there were any other languages that left Africa for Asia within the last 10,000 years. Is Sumerian one such example? Yeah. Right, I'm going to skip this, yeah, just for the sake of getting to the point. So Fari Supir proceeds, yeah, to do a comparison between the reconstruction of Proto-Bantu, yeah, the Proto-Bantu language, which was reconstructed based upon existing so-called Bantu languages, yeah, and compares it with Sumerian, in as much as Proto-Bantu has been compared with other Bantu languages and Niger-Congo languages, like Wolof, for example, is one example that he gives, and he's going to go into it here. And he says the results here of his, and he goes through the process of breaking down different words and different. So when you're dealing with linguistics, yeah, and historical comparative linguistics, you're dealing with things like phonology, the sounds, yeah, and sound changes. Bear with me, I'm getting there, yeah. What's it called? Sound changes over time, yeah, because when languages evolve and develop into new languages, what tends to happen is that the sounds from the parent languages tend to have consistent changes and evolutions in the newer versions of the language. Yeah, that's one way to explain it. So that's one way you look at historical comparative linguistics. You look at the phonology, the sounds and the sound changes. You also look at the morphemes. Yeah, the morphemes is like the internal grammar. Yeah, of language. So it's the way words are made up. Yeah, and there tends to be consistent changes and evolutions from one parent language to the many child languages that come from it. Yeah, and then you have semantics, which is the meanings of the words. Yeah, and they often also have consistent shifts and changes and evolutions. Yeah, so phonology, morphemes, and semantics within the context of the history and the culture of the people. Taking all of that into consideration, you go into an historical comparative analysis linguistically. He goes through that in the book. I'm not going to go through that here. If you want to check it out more detail, read the book. What I will do is highlight his foundings. He says, this gives us 65 recurrent correspondences between Proto-Bantu and Sumerian, of which 24 have recurrent correspondences, all segments, and share exact semantic sense. 5 have sporadic correspondence of the first consonant among items with exact semantic sense, but have all other segments recurring. Correspondingly, 13 have recurrent correspondence of consonants, but the vowels are irregular but accountable. 19 have recurrent correspondences of all segments, but semantic sense is inexact. And lastly, 4 cultural items showing previously established correspondences in all segments, but displaying semantic shifts expected with urban development. This situation of 52 comparative pairs with regular vowels and 13 with irregular vowels can be compared with other African languages when they are compared with Proto-Bantu. Buli, for example, has 40 regular vowels comparative with 40 regular vowel comparative pairs and 20 with irregular vowels. Kissi has a ratio of 42 to 19. Wolof has 59 to 17. Efik has 49 to 12. And Bambara has 21 to 8. Yeah, I know you're not going to get all of that. I'm just reading it, and you can come back to it to understand it properly later. Yeah. Of course, this study is it should be clear. This study is in progress, and thus these figures are likely to slightly increase. But they show Sumerian to have an affinity to Proto-Bantu comparable to the South Atlantic of Gur languages. The estimation for the period when the ancestors of the Sumerians were separated from the ancestors of the Proto-Bantu speakers would be around 8,000 to 7,000 BC. Whatever else can be said, what we can say is whatever else can be said, we can say that Sumerian is as much a Niger-Congo language lexically as any Niger-Congo language. Sumerian is thus shown to be a language of African origin and cannot be seen any longer as a language isolate. A language isolate is a language that is, as far as we are aware, totally unconnected to other languages. Okay, so they're saying Sumerian is not a language isolate. This means that the people of Sumer would have traveled from likely somewhere in and around the Congo region. Yeah, deep in Africa. All right. Why are we emphasizing this? Because the Sumer people are not Semitic people. The Semitic people come into that region later on, and they're not all black. Some of them are black. Or should I say, some of them who evolve into Semitic culture are black, but they're not all black. So nobody can make the argument that all of the Semites are black. Nobody can justifiably make the argument that all of the Hebrews, all of the Jews, all of the Arabs are black. Yeah, nobody can make the argument. All right, we're done with that now. Yeah, these are primary sources. Yeah, from Kemet. Yeah, in terms of, we know that Kemet documented its history very, very well, and these are depictions, yeah, of various different groups of people as drawn up by people in ancient Kemet themselves. This is a primary document. Yeah, this is not a reconstruction. This is a picture of inscriptions on the wall, the Temple of Ramesses, yeah, the third, in Kemet. All right, so that's 20th dynasty. Yeah, the dates in black are the long form chronology. Yeah, there's a short chronology for Kemet and a long chronology for Kemet. If you want more information on that, I'm going to say get when we ruled, because Brother Robin Walker goes into it very, very deeply, but I'm not going to go into it here. Yeah, so I'm highlighting that this is not a reconstruction. This is a primary source, and as you can see, how the Syrian is depicted, yeah, even how the Libyan is depicted, because it is understood that after the Hyksos are thrown out, not all of them went to the east. Some of them went to the west and came back from the west as well. Yeah, so there's even a significant degree of non-Africans, yeah, in Libya, in the Libya area, sorry, at this point. But you can see the Halibu, yeah, or the Apiru or the Aparu, which is said to be related to, or some of the people that could be suggested to be the Hebrews. Yeah, you can see how they're depicted by the people of Kemet themselves. The Hittites, who are in fact Europeans, you can see how they're depicted. Yeah, this is not a reconstruction. This is a primary source. Yeah, it was said to me yesterday that I only used images from the later dynasties, yeah, which was 4. So we're going to get into that in a second. All right, but this one is a reconstruction of images in that same temple. Yeah, and I was reluctant to put this in the presentation because I know how fickle people can be sometimes. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that there's more images that were reconstructed, and this one features a Kemetu as well. But it is a reconstruction. All right. So if you are of the mind to throw it up because it's a reconstruction, feel free to do so. Yeah, feel free to do so. All right. This is also a primary source, and as you can see, the people them depicted. Yeah. There's 2 different colors here. All right, but this is how the people of Kemet depicted in the 18th dynasty. Yeah, the people coming in from Asia. Right, this is a block relief from the 18th dynasty battle. Yeah, and again, you've got the short chronology dates here, and you've got the long chronology dates here as well. And also at the bottom, you see where it was stolen from and where it currently is, because some of these reliefs and pieces of block and pieces of the wall are currently in museums in America and Europe, and these kinds of things. All right. Now this one at the bottom, you can see the people of Kemet depiction of themselves. At the top, you see the people of Kemet depiction of a group of migrants. Yeah, Amorite migrants. Yeah, in the 12th dynasty. So this is before Yeah, this is 3,000 and blowout. Yeah, by short chronology standards. Yeah, BC. Yeah, so this is before all of that biblical stuff. Yeah, this is what's the word? This is in the tomb of Khnum Hotep. Yeah, in the 18th, so the 12th dynasty. All right, this is a close up of the top of that image. Yeah, and you can see them depicted, and the colors and the hair and the beards and so on and so forth. Yeah, how the people of Kemet depicted it. Again, this is not a reconstruction. This is a primary source. This is a picture that is taken in the tomb of Khnum Hotep. Okay, and here you see at the bottom where the people are, how the people of Kemet depict themselves. The point I'm making here is that the people of Kemet depicted the Asiatics, the Semites, and this is how they depicted them. Yeah, over a period of over 1,000 years. Yeah, all right. 12th dynasty. This is the same. The same tomb, Khnum Hotep, 12th dynasty. We can see again these migrants. So you can see on one hand the people of Kemet, yeah, on the right hand side, yeah, because they're assisting the migrants, right? And then the people them of the Asiatics, yeah, the Amorites on the left hand side. You can see the difference in the depiction. These people on the left hand side look like what we might call Arabs today, yeah, in Saudi Arabia and them kind of things there. Okay. This is not an insult. We're just highlighting the history and how the people of Kemet depicted these people. Yeah. All right. Okay. And this is a reconstruction of those last three images. Yeah. Again, I was reluctant to put it in, but just for clarity, it's a reconstruction. Yeah. So this is not a primary. This is the primary, and this is the primary. This is a reconstruction of those two primary sources. All right. Again, this is a primary. And forgive me because I didn't put these in order, yeah. So it might look confusing, all right. But yeah, of a Nubian and an Asiatic prisoner. This is again in and around that biblical period, yeah. What's it called in Kemet? So you can see how they depict the Nubian. You can see how they depict the Asiatic. Okay, so I'm highlighting the fact that even if there were Africans there, all of them were not African. So nobody can make the claim that the religions are African because all of the Hebrews and all of the Arabs were Africans. No, they weren't. And they were Africans there. Then the question becomes, what is the cultural context in which the religions developed? Yeah. Is Semitic culture African culture, or is Semitic culture influenced by African culture in the same way that Greek culture is Greek culture influenced by African culture, Roman culture is Roman culture influenced by African culture, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and this is the final one, 25th dynasty, and so on. So we've gone from the 12th dynasty to the 25th dynasty, and there are some older than that. All right. So Kemet becomes Egypt. Yeah. After all of that, Kemet becomes Egypt, and from between 623 and 663 BC and 525 BC, this signals the complete fall of Kemet as a black civilization. After this point, there is no black rulership in Kemet any longer. Yeah. But all of the churches, the old churches in Africa, are built and established around this period. Yeah, around the Greco-Roman rule of Kemet, and their influence on places like Ethiopia, yeah, and Nubia, what comes to be known as Nubia. All right, so these are the dates during which those churches are built. Yeah, and I went into this yesterday, but I'm not going to do it now. It just speaks to the fact that the church in Nubia was established because of the fact that Justinian had a political aim in mind, and he wanted to co-opt people into his army, yeah, to fight the Persians. All right, I'm not going to go into this now for the sake of time, yeah, because I want to get to this point, yeah. So the criteria here is not just geographical or phenotypical. It's not because it happened in Africa, therefore it's African. Ridiculous argument, yeah, right? It's ridiculous argument, yeah, and it's not just phenotypical. First of all, just because a black man or woman does something, it doesn't mean that they're acting within their own cultural matrix or religious matrix, yeah. And secondly, the people of the Middle East cannot be said to have been all black, yeah. Various different kinds of people meet up in that area and develop what is called Semitic culture and a Semitic language. Yeah, the idea of being a Semite means that you are a mixture of various different groups of people that become an ethnicity. Okay, so the idea that they're all exclusively African, I don't think holds weight. Yeah, even though there certainly are Africans among them. And again, I never made this claim. Yeah, that the Semites are Europeans. I never made that claim. All right, or exclusively Europeans. So the consideration here for continent, the consideration for religion here is not just geographical or phenotypical, it is cultural and political. Yeah? Why am I emphasizing this? Because we have a group of religions called Abrahamic religions, yeah, who have done a lot to define themselves in opposition to other religions, to other cultures. Remember, the Hebrew culture is a culture from which the religion comes. Yeah, the religions come. All right. So the religion is cultural and it is political. And what you define as a part of your religion and not a part of your religion, or a part of your culture and not a part of your culture, is political. So when the Abrahamic religions say we are monotheistic and you are polytheistic, that is a cultural and a political designation. They have defined you outside of them. Yeah. So when they define you outside of them, do the people that they are defining as outside of them also have the right to define the Abrahamic religions in relation to themselves? That is the question that I want to ask here. And in doing so, we have to establish what an African religion is. And again, we get back to this term Kimoyo, which I defined at the beginning for those who were not here. And basically, we're talking about the indigenous spiritual systems of the African people considered collectively. And we're going to get into a deeper explanation of Kimoyo right now. I'm going to go for another half an hour and then I'm done. All right, because we could go into more, but there's also a link in the chat, sorry, in the description, yeah, to my series, Kimoyo, Why I Choose African Spirituality. And I go into more of what I'm going to go into now. Yeah. All right, of what I'm going to go into now. So that's why I'm not going to spend a whole heap of time here, but I wanted to get here, yeah, because in the debate, what I really wanted to do is spend 10 minutes on explaining on all the other stuff with less slides, yeah, and then get to this point, because I'm arguing that to answer the question, are the Abrahamic religions African, we can't just look at the Abrahamic religions. We also have to look at what are African religions, what other religions, yeah, or spiritual systems do African people have? How do we define them? And how do we define them in identifying what is an African religion? What is an African spiritual system? That is the question. And then once we define that, do the Abrahamic religions fit that mold and that criteria? And my argument is that they don't. Yeah? And it's not an insult to say that they don't. Because a religion doesn't have to be African for it to be valid. Yeah? It can be valid to whoever wants to be valid. They want it to be valid for. Yeah? All right? But African spiritual systems also have validity in and of themselves, in and of their own merit. Yeah, and that is what I wanted to get to here. So this relates to the idea now of worldview. Yeah, again, Wikipedia definition. Yeah, and you notice that I've only used Wikipedia for definitions. Yeah, of social phenomena. All right, like continent and worldview. So the worldview, right, is defined as the fundamental cognitive orientation of an individual or society, encompassing the whole of the individual's or society's knowledge and point of view. A worldview can include natural philosophy, fundamental existential and normative postulates or themes, values, emotions, and ethics. Yeah, and so I'm suggesting that there's a natural philosophy. Yeah. There are fundamental existential and normative postulates or themes, values, emotions, and ethics that define African culture, that make African culture uniquely able to develop spiritual systems based upon the aforesaid, yeah, and also that make them distinct from Abrahamic religions, yeah. In other words, let's treat that in a shorter way. The natural philosophy, fundamental, essential, and normative postulates, or themes, values, emotions, and ethics of African spiritual systems make them distinct from Abrahamic religions. That is the point I'm making. Can I prove that? Yes. And we begin with the wisdom of Baba Yusuf Ben Yakanan, who says that religion is the deification of a people's culture. Therefore, religion empowers the people in whose culture the religion is expressed. There is no religion without a culture. Yeah, as much as people were sent prophets, and God came down and wrote the book, and so received the vision, the revelation, and whoever and whatever. There is no religion without a culture. Yeah, the religious texts of the Abrahamic religions, yeah, speak to the cultures of the people of the religion in various different ways. What to wear, yeah, what to do, what not to do, what to yam, yeah, who for marry, who you not for marry, how you for marry, yeah. Once you give the thing a ancestry, a lineage, yes. Once you give it a people, a chosen people. Once you give it a language, yeah, a definitive language through which the religion must be expressed in order to be properly understood, you have given it you have identified the culture from which the religion springs. There is no religion that is not devolved and arrived out of a culture. Yeah. So is there a concept of an African worldview? Can we say that there is a concept of an African worldview from which indigenous African spiritual systems arise and develop their formation? Can we say that? Can we say that? Should I share the link? I'm going to share the link just in case anybody wants to join. I meant to do this before, so I apologize, and I spent a bit longer as I did yesterday on this than I intended to. Yeah. So, but I hope ones have got something from this and you understand where I was trying to go in the debate yesterday. All right, but I will take some comments before I wrap up. Yeah, so feel free to join me whilst I get into what I really want to get into. All right, so again, it's important to argue this from the perspective of what is an African spiritual system. What African spiritual systems did Africans have prior to Abrahamic religions, and is it necessary for us to always give pride of place to Abrahamic religions and negate the indigenous spiritual systems and their contemporary evolutions in modern times? Yeah. So Baba Sheikh Anta Diop, yeah, scientist, anthropologist, yeah, and a historian among many other disciplines, yeah, says the following. Well, he writes two books, yeah. One, the first called The Cultural Unity of Black Africa, the domains of matriarchy and of patriarchy in classical antiquity, yeah. And in this, he's doing what the book says. He's establishing that there is a cultural unity in Black Africa, yes, which gives expression to the fact that there is an African worldview, or at the very least, a Black African worldview. Okay, in Black Africa, the economic and the cultural basis for a federated state, he is giving suggestions as to how that cultural unity can develop into political and economic statehood and nationhood. Yeah, that's the purpose of the thing. And this is why it's important to deal with indigenous African spiritual systems. This is why it's important to deal with African culture, because we're not just debating religion. Yeah. Again, invoking the Pan-African spirit. When we have a conversation like this, what we need to understand, yeah, is that we are dealing with the fundamental basis upon which we are going to construct and develop unity as a people. So when you see me banging on about African spiritual systems and African culture, it's not just because, yeah, man has a vendetta against Abrahamic religions. It's nonsense. It's because I understand, yeah, the essential value, yeah, of African spiritual traditions in the development of African people. That's what it's about. All right. And so Baba, sorry, kings and queens, Baba Sheikh Anta Diop, yeah, in the latter book, Black Africa, says a consideration of I'm giving you the highlights because I'm not going to go into how he establishes this, yeah, because never had time for that in the debate. A consideration of the pre-colonial African family, that of the state, the accompanying philosophical and moral concepts and the like, reveals a consistent cultural unity resulting from similar adaptations to the same material and philosophical, and physical conditions. He's reinforced by Baba Kwesi Pra, who's also a linguist and a cultural scientist. He's from Ghana, but he now lives in South Africa, who in the book Anthropological Prism, Studies on African Realities, says, with due recognition for variety and variation, it is possible to identify two principal features of traditional African religious life which promoted ethnic integration. First, the series or catalogue of seasonal and repetitive festivals associated with material production and social reproduction. And secondly, traditions of ancestor veneration, so common amongst African people. Yeah? Just emphasizing the fact that we've developed similar ways of doing things, a similar ideas, similar modalities, similar social formations and political formations, and expressions and ceremonies, yeah, as a result of dealing with the environment of Mama Africa, yeah, and relating to each other, yeah, over time. People often talk about, again, how much Africans traveled, Yassa and this and everything, but people often don't talk about the relationships that Africans had with other Africans, the relationships that Africans had with each other, and how culture developed and evolved as a result of those interactions. We tend to privilege our interactions with non-Africans, for better or for worse. Yeah, the studies of the Ancestral Voices team, Brother Dalian Adofo and Sister Verona Smith Adofo, promote and identify 5 principal areas in which Africans share commonalities within the context of spiritual systems. And the first is a shared understanding, yes, of the Supreme Creator, the Supreme Being. And that is emphasizing the fact that the concept of the Creator in African spiritual systems is very different to the concept of the Creator in Abrahamic religions. From Kemet, Tarseti on down, the Kemetu, Tarseti, yeah, concept of the Creator, Amun, Amun Ra, Bes, yeah, Min, etc., is fundamental. Ptah, Atum, etc., is fundamentally different, yeah, from the Abrahamic concept of the Creator, yeah. Reverence, and then the second element is reverence for nature and the natural forces, yeah, which is considered to be shirk and kuffar and pagan and heathen, yeah, in Abrahamic religious thought. That if we reverence the nature, we reverence the tree, you reverence the river, you reverence the ocean, you reverence the sun, you reverence other animals in creation, yeah, this is considered to be against, yeah, God. It's considered to be insulting to God, all right? Veneration of ancestors. Again, this is problematic and taboo, yeah, in Abrahamic religions, or I should say, it's problematic and taboo to venerate any ancestors other than the ancestors and the descendants of Abraham. 4, rituals and invocationary practices. Yeah, there's a shit that, for example, libation. I don't know of an African spiritual system that does not deal with a concept of libation as in honoring rituals that honor the ancestors. Yeah, divine nature and purpose of human beings. So African spiritual systems explain an ontology, yeah, a philosophy of the self, the understanding of self as human beings that is shared. There are linked and shared commonalities between Africans in terms of what is a human being and what is the purpose of human life. And that is different from the conception that we find in the Abrahamic religions. And on the face of it, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with the Abrahamic religions having a different conception to the African spiritual systems. They are just different. And because of the fact that the Abrahamic religious systems have been hostile towards African spirituality and culture, we have to be clear about what the differences are. So we have this concept called Ukobon, as I said yesterday, yeah. Shout out to Brother Asa Imhotep, because I've been trying to get this book for time, and he was able to furnish me with it, and it just so happened to be very useful in the context of this debate. Yeah, so thank you, my brother, for making this available to us. We appreciate that. I'm still looking for a physical copy. I like physical copies of books, you know what I mean? I want to smell the page and all that someday. All right, but Brother Jordan Ungabane, yeah, in a book called Conflict of the Minds, yeah, published in 1979. He's an initiate into spiritual systems in Southern Africa. Yeah, he's a Zulu ancestor, and he wrote this book exploring various different political, social, and cultural issues relating to Africans in Southern Africa in the fight against apartheid. Yeah, or not even apartheid, just Western colonialism, yeah, in general. All right. And he says this: the section of the Nguni from whom the Zulus descended believe that all phenomena is into sing. And yesterday I didn't read all of the Zulus, so I'm going to do it today. All right. And if there's any Zulus speaking brothers and sisters out there, feel free to correct me. I certainly welcome that. He says, Izinto, sing into, uluto, yeah, had their origins in a living reality or consciousness, which they call ukobo. This reality had no beginning and no end. It was alive and existed from eternity. Iguna pakade. Yeah, I believe I've said that correctly. Iguna paka pa. Yeah, kade. Yeah. Yeah, we have to wrestle with these terminologies, kings and queens, these beautiful African words. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, to eternity. Yeah, each phenomena has its ukobo, reality or value, which was an integral part of the infinite value. Each was ukobo, law kobo, value, which is a portion of value. Everything in creation has a value which is a portion of the value of the entire creation itself. Yeah. The person evolved from this value in response to the law of appearing, teto, where velo, or the demands of his nature. Isimo, or perpetual evolution. Ukuma njalo. His destiny was forever to evolve, Ukuna Njalo, and discover more satisfying dimensions of being, Ukuba Ungumuntu. These pronouncements on the origins, nature, and destiny of the person exist in Izaga, aphorisms, and from an important section of the law of being human, Mteto Wabuntu, which issues from the law of appearing. All right. Yeah, I hope everybody's following this as it stands. Yeah, I'm not going to extemporize too much because what I'm trying to demonstrate here, I'm going to go from one African spiritual system to the next in order to demonstrate the shared understandings of nature, the creator, and the creation between them. Yeah, between them. All right. And yes, but we're getting into this Ubuntu business right now. Yeah, but this is related to all this Ubuntu business. Yeah. Okay. He goes on to say each phenomena was a cluster of small values. A phenomena all phenomena were alive because the infinite Ukobo was alive. All phenomena existed inside Ukobo because there was nothing outside of it. Customs, laws, and other legal usages were part of the self-definition on one plane. On one another, they were expressions of the law of appearing in different environments. All in creation is a reflection of this law of appearing, law of coming into existence, law of coming into manifestation. Yeah, and all of the manifested things are a reflection, an expression of the Ukobo. Yes, one of the functions of the mind of the person or the nome or the nation was to translate Ukobo's law of appearing into social law and action. It's very important. Translate Ukobo's law into social law and action. Note that, please, and let it cement in your head. Yeah. Translate Ukobo's law, the law of the universe, into social law and action. The Zulu-speaking nomarchies of antiquity believed that all things had their origin in Ukobo. Everything in the cosmic order evolved from Ukobo. This Ukobo was primordial consciousness. Primordial consciousness. It had no beginning and no end. It was the infinite total of the values of all things, which together made the cosmic order. All right. And so this concept, now, this is something that I read even before I knew about Ukobo. There's a book by the name of the Holy Odu, yeah, and in it, an example, the writer is whose name I'm forgetting. She's a Nifa, which is a mother priest, yeah, in the Ifa tradition. But she's given expression to this concept of the African worldview in relation to Ifa and its relation to other African spiritual systems and how they have shared concepts, yeah. And she quotes from an elder, yeah, called I always mess up this pronunciation, Mandla Langa, yeah, Mandla Langa. What's it called? In an article called, or an essay called "The Riddle of Existence," yeah, and he deals with the concept called Itongo. Now, when I've seen it elsewhere, Itongo relates to the ancestors and the universal mind of the ancestors, yeah. But he puts it forward as a universal spirit, and it seems to relate to the Ukobo. And what I'm yet to understand is whether this is just a version of the Ukobo in a different dialect or language, or it's relating to the Ukobo in another way, shape, or form. But I'll put it here while I'm still working that out because it's powerful, right? And it makes the point, yeah. The Itongo universal spirit this is still in Southern Africa now, is all that ever was, is or ever shall be, conceivable or inconceivable. The Itongo is all things. All things are of it, but the sum of all things is not the Itongo. Yeah, the Itongo is all the power there is. All power is of it, but all power perceivable or conceivable is not Itongo. The Itongo is all the wisdom there is. All wisdom is of it, but all wisdom conceivable is not Itongo. All substance, all power, all wisdom is of it, and it is in them and manifests through them, but it is also above them and beyond them, eternally unmanifest. Yeah, that's the seen and the unseen. I'm not going to go into it all too much, but just pay attention and see the linkages. Yeah, man who is of the Itongo can never know the Itongo while he is man. All he can know of it are certain manifestations which come in within the range of his perception. The pupil is generally taught that the manifestations are three in number, namely universal mind, universal force, universal substance, or universal matter. But really, there are but two manifestations, mind and matter. What we call force is not a separate manifestation. It is simply certain of the lowest or grosser grades of mind. Force is simply that portion of mind which endowed matter with form. It is that portion of mind which transmits the idea of form to the higher grades where consciousness dwells. Let the people think, and he must see that this is so. Color, size, shape, what are they? Simply light vibrations, which when passed on to the consciousness, give the idea of form. And what is vibration? It is force, heat, cold, hardness, softness, varieties of taste and smell. All vibrations and therefore also force. If you make a force a separate manifestation, then you also must make those planes of mind which transfer the ideas of passion or emotion separate manifestations. In the beginning of the cosmic cycle, the Itongo first manifested in all the many, I'm going to skip this, yeah, for the sake of time, yeah, but you kind of get the vibes, yeah, all right, and you can come back to read it if you want to, all right, and it goes into how the Itongo becomes individualized and so on and so forth and rare. All right. And so we come back to Jordan Ngabane again in the book Conflict of the Minds. And he says this: for the quarrel between black and white is in the final analysis a collision between a civilization which teaches that life's purpose is to discover more satisfying dimensions of being human, and its opposite, which stigmatizes and inferiorizes the human being in this setting. In this setting, to be different is to be wrong. Yeah, to have a different skin complexion is to commit an unforgivable crime. Simultaneous validity was given added significance when I traveled to West Africa. This is a brother from Southern Africa speaking. Yes. In 1955 and the United States in 1969, I discovered that the West Africans saw reality from perspectives I had in my ignorance regarded as peculiar to the Ubuntu teaching in my part of the continent. He's realizing, yeah, that the people them in West Africa think like the people them in Southern Africa from a traditional perspective. Yeah. I was pleasantly surprised to discover that the common factor in Southern and Western African experiences was our evaluation of the person, which gave identical rhythms to our different cultural experiences. And the idea of the person is evolved from the ontology and the cosmology of the people, the idea of their place in nature, the idea of themselves and their place in nature. So from there, we go on to the Kikongo. I'm going to deal with the Kikongo, and then I'm going to deal with the ancient Kemet, and I'm going to close. Yeah? All right? So we're going to deal with, so, and I'm hoping you see the linkages that I'm dealing with here. All right? Now we're going to Kimbo and then the Kiabonseki Fukia. Yeah? In the text, Digging Up the Past, an Approach to Fundamental Development. He says, the Bantu concept of God is a principle of Kalunga, i.e., listen carefully, the Bantu concept of what? God is a principle of Kalunga, i.e., welded opposite forces, positive and negative in one. Baza dia Kibantu, Munzabe I Nklu, wa Kalunga, I don't know how you pronounce the ISV, wa Ngolo, Zabundana, Kala, Yelovemba, va Kimosi. Yeah, we love for, you know, pronounce them Kikongo word there. The Muntu himself is seen in terms of these paired forces. Nkwa Luzungu, he is a being of paired organic forces. That's what Nkwa Luzungu means. Yeah. Some are said Lumoso or Lukento, left or female. Others are Lunene or Lubakala, right or male. Because all beings are resultant of the Kalunga, the complete force is made up of welded opposite forces. Welded opposite forces of Kala and November, positive and negative in one. As a matter of fact, the whole African religion, as one can see in their aspect among the Bantu people, have two key words besides Nzambe or Kalunga. These words are Ngolo and Moyo, force, energy or dynamism, and life, vitality. It is here that the African religions, in their aspect among the Bantu, find the roots of their dynamism in their wholeness. Yeah, so I'm hoping that you are all seeing how this relates to the concept of Itongo, how this relates to the concept of Okobo. Yes, previously mentioned. The Bantu religion is not animism or animalism. Yeah, so you can't, in order to speak about African spiritual traditions, you have to break through certain misconceptions, right? And one of them is this animism business. Yeah, he says neither are the Bantu animist or animalist. The Bantu people are vitalist. This is accepting themselves as well as everything in the universe as a part of Nkingu Amoyo, the principle of life in its wholeness. Ukobo, Itongo. Yes, their religion deals principally with force and vitality. Yeah, remember what we just read about Itongo, about force and matter being an aspect of force and vice versa. Yeah, or force being a modality of matter. Yeah, force and vitality. A religion that does not believe in any physical being, but in Ungolo ye moyo mudingo dingo. Ungolo ye moyo mudingo dingo. Yeah, force and life through dingo dingo, the natural way of life and change. Ungolo can also mean power. Yeah, force, power, and moyo is life. Yeah, in Kikongo. And moyo is a word that you find in many languages that means various different things. But we're gonna move on. This religion can be called dynamo vitalism, and as you can see here, kimoyo, yeah, kimoyo, we can say literally translates as dynamo vitalism, yeah. We live our life in harmony and connection to the dynamic vital force of creation. That's what it's about. Yeah, the religion itself is not a question of belief. It is a question of tadingo dingo, ye kalamudingo dingo. Yeah, I love this particular saying here. Tadingo dingo, ye kalamudingo dingo. Participating in dingo dingo and being a part of dingo dingo. Remember, dingo dingo is sorry, where's it gone? The natural way of life and change, evolution. Yeah. All right. Tadingo dingo mukala ye dingo dingo. Yeah. Say ye kala mu dingo dingo. Participating in dingo dingo and being a part of dingo dingo. The Muntu sees his religion like dancing. Dancing is not a question of belief. It is a question of participating and of being part of the dance. When I was doing the Kimoyo series, yeah, I said these words. I said, Africans don't believe in God. We dance with God. I mean, I'll still let you go, kings and queens. This is why every Muntu African dances exactly in the same way, same manner. He talks and exhorts his Ngola and Moyo. The key words of his religion are force and vitality. Sorry, or force and vitality, into which Nzambe, God, is not a physical being of male or female gender, but a kalunga, yeah, the principle of opposite worlded forces in one, a principle that one can understand because inseparable from matter only in being part of the motion through the dingo dingo itself. In other words, we cannot understand the fullness of creation, yeah, you know, in our physical state, but we so we can't comprehend the fullness of creation, I should say. But the only way we can understand it, yeah, creation, is by being in harmony with it, is by living, yeah, through the developments of the earth and the cosmos itself, and recognizing ourselves as a part of that development. This is the emphasis, yeah, in the African spiritual system. The emphasis is not on declaring and substantiating the supremacy of your God over other people's God. It's not the focus. The focus is not even on the worship of God. The focus is on the dancing with God. Yeah? All right. Let us be more specific and clear here. According to the Kibantu, such as one finds among the Congo, a Bantu culture group well known to us, these opposite worlded or paired forces, Kala and November, do not exist separately in nature, societies, or in people. They do not separately exist as label to any particular good, positive, or bad, negative, known nation, society, or individual either. These forces are always found met zakangama, yeah, existing welded in one, in nature as well as in koso, makia, and semono, any elements related to nature, in societies as well as individuals. The Congo people say that mukonso ma mwena lubakala ye lukento, getting up as ISV, kala ye November. In each element of nature, there is presence of masculinity and femininity, i.e., two worlded forces of different nature, symbolizing birth and death, Kala and November. These opposite worlded forces in each element of the nature are responsible for the balance of nations, societies, individuals, nature itself, and of the whole universe. It is, according to the African religion, in its aspect among the Bantu, the nature of Nzambi Kalunga, God X self. I like that. Tonta Muvambisa Ngolo Zazi Zoleza Ntungasani I Mubunga Nza Ye Kwabula Kinenga Kia Loyalunga. Yeah, my love. Oh, yeah, man, I love the Kibantu, man. I swear I forgot. Yeah, willing to isolate these opposite worlded forces is to blow up the whole world and to break the balance of the universe as a want to negate the dingo dingo of life. In Kingo and Zambi, the African principle of God that we all are, the principle of life and change through dingo dingo. Yeah, not going to extemporize too much. I hope that you're seeing the linkages. If you're seeing the linkages and you're listening, please let me know in the chat. Yeah, in the live chat. If you're seeing the linkages right now between Kalunga, the Kalunga in Zambia, or in Zambia Kalunga, the Itongo and the Ukobo so far. Yeah, we've gone from Southern Africa to Central Africa. Yeah, now we're going to go to West Africa. Yeah, we're not going to spend no long reading for this part, but just see this particular excerpt from the Pearl Fox, yeah, which deals with the Dogon philosophy in West Africa. It says with the word Amma. The word Amma is the name for the divinity, the creator in the Dogoso, yeah, which is the Dogon language, and Sigiso, which is their ritual language. It said the word Amma means to hold firmly, to embrace strongly, to keep in one place. One calls Amma's name all day long. One calls him when the day begins. He is the Hogon chief of the scheme, Hogon of the wasters. Amma arranges the scheme of things after he had wasted. Amma 1 is space 14-fold. To pronounce the name Amma is to preserve all space. The name Amma is the preservation and safekeeping of all things. Yeah, again, not going to extemporize too deeply, but I hope you are appreciating the relationship between Amma as a concept, Kalunga and Zambi as a concept, Ukobo in Tongo Itongo as a concept. And then we're going to end on Ma'at, yeah, and bring this all together. And again, I hope you see the linkage. So we've gone from Southern Africa to Central Africa to West Africa, and now we're going to go to East Africa. Yeah, bearing in mind that what we see in Kemet is a reflection of Nile Valley civilization. So this spiritual conceptuality encompasses the entire Nile Valley in ancient Africa. Yeah, and taken from an essay by Theophile Benga called Egypt, Ancient History of African Philosophy. He says Ma, which is the root word for Ma'at, basically means the real. Yeah, and Ma'at is the creator. Yeah, right? A particular expression of the creator. Yeah, the reality. That is that which is genuine and authentic as opposed to artificial and spurious. Ma'at is reality as a whole. That is the totality of all things possessing actuality, existence, or essence. Ma'at is that which exists objectively. In fact, Ma'at is that which has necessary and not just contingent existence. This is why Ma'at is everywhere and pervades all creation. It means also that Ma'at is pertinent to all spheres of reality, the divine or sacred, the cosmic, the physical, the political, and the familial. In short, Ma'at is an exhaustive and comprehensive subject. Itongo, Ukobo, Kalunga, Amma, we could say Nyama, yeah, we could say Umbog, yeah, we could say Ntu, we could say Ashe, we could say Kla or Kra, yeah, we could say Vudan, yeah, we could say all of these names that I've just mentioned come from north, east, south, and west of the continent, whereby these words represent this consciousness of the allness of the creator and our relationship to the allness. Yeah. It means, let's move on. This inclusiveness makes it an orderly and aesthetically coherent whole, which is why Ma'at also means the orderliness of the totality of existence. Accordingly, everything in the universe that is real and orderly is an expression of Ma'at. I hope you are seeing the linkages. Yeah. In particular, when in society, human beings conduct themselves in the proper way or perform in the correct way, they are manifesting Ma'at. Hence, these are the meanings of Ma'at as truth, justice, righteousness, rightness. Ma'at is the highest conception of physical and moral law known in ancient Egypt, known to the ancient Egyptians. Thus, it is that the goddess Ma'at was the personification of law, order, rule, truth, right, righteousness, canon, justice, straightforwardness, integrity, uprightness, consciousness, and perfection. Egyptian civilization was built upon this very inclusive concept with its great fecundity of meaning. However, the talk of Ma'at is of no use if it is not practiced. In truth, Ma'at is a way of life and spirituality. Remember what I read about Okobo in terms of how the concept of Okobo on the universal level factors into the social, political, and economic life of the people. In other words, the spiritual system is focused on mirroring the order of the universe in the way the society organizes itself politically, economically, and socially, etc. Yeah. And so we're going to end there. I go more into this in the Kimoyo series, but there is so much more to go into. Yesterday, I touched on this and definitions, of the creator, because even just the words Olulumare, Olurun, Onyame, Nyankapong, Odaman, Koma, Aurade, and so on. Everything that I've just read is encapsulated in these words alone. Chuku, Chineke, Nkulunkulu, Ngai, Mogai, Nzambe, and Amen Ra, Wak, all of these names for the creator give all of these names for the creator give expression to all of the things that I've just read just now. This is why I don't like to use the word God, because God doesn't encapsulate everything that I've just read. So when we say, are the Abrahamic religions African? And we don't pay attention, to what indigenous African spiritual systems are dealing with, and some very disparaging remarks, with all due respect to my brother Sniper, Maku, were made in the debate last night. Some disparaging remarks, which is unfortunately not unusual among African people. And I haven't seen this for myself, but I hear it was worse in the chat. Man play a praise song to Shango, and people start telling me what witchcraft and devil worship on them. And that's one kings and queens. All right. So we have to. My challenge was to try and relate this conversation, are the Abrahamic religions African, not just from the history that I detailed at the beginning, although that was also necessary, but from the perspective of the African spiritual systems and what they teach and what they're dealing with and the focus within them. And if we can identify, in as much as the Abrahamic religions identify themselves for what they are, and also identify who and what is not a part of them based upon their own standards. Do the African indigenous spiritual systems have the right to define who and what they are and judge who is a part of them and not a part of them based upon their own standard, especially in relation to ideas, people, and spiritual systems that have condemned them as pagan, as heathen, as kuffar, as shirk, as devil worship, as demonology? Is that allowed? And more than is it allowed, is it necessary? And that we want to know. Is it necessary? Jilla answer says, electromagnetism is our reality. We live in an interdependent and interactive universe. The interesting thing about that statement is that when you look at things like Aku and Obi, or Oyeko and Ogbe, yeah, which are the principles in the Ifa and Afa, Igbo and Yoruba divination systems and other divination systems. They relate to things like electromagnetism. Yeah. All right. Electromagnetism being Obi, gravity, yeah, being Ako, for example. Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna end it there, family. Yeah. Nobody clicked the link earlier, so I'm assuming that nobody had anything to say. All right. You know what I mean? So we give thanks, you know, for those who are listening. I had a bit more time to go through the arguments now. Yeah. And so I hope ones and ones learned something or got something from that. And if you did, yeah, please feel free. Do that, the brother Conan Lee says we're all shy. It's all good, King. Yeah. So I don't know. I like there's more I could go into. Yeah. There's more I could go into, and so I may come back and deal with more because like I've got here, for example, the idea of muntu. Yeah. So I've gone from the concept of the self, so the universe and the self within the universe, to more delving into the concept of the self. Yeah. And what a human being is from an African spiritualist perspective, and how the concept of what a human being is, as Baba Ungabane was saying in terms of how he went from Southern Africa to West Africa, and he found a similar concept of the self. How that concept of the self is mirrored in various different African spiritual traditions. Yeah, so we've got different aspects of the self. All right, the self is considered to be a community of self in the words of Baba Naim Akbar. It's a community. The individual is a community of selves. Yeah, and you find different expressions of this and shared concepts of this throughout African spiritual systems. So we go from self-healing power by Baba Kimba the Fukiao to person, divinity, and nature by Baba Chukwunyele Kamalu. We go through all of that. And then I had some biblical verses, yeah, to demonstrate how and Quranic verses to demonstrate how they separate themselves and make themselves distinct from other spiritual systems, and in particular the spiritual system of ancient Kemet. Yeah. And so that's where I was going with that. Give thanks to Puntat General. I appreciate that. But yeah, like I said, in the description, there's a link to a playlist, yeah, called Kimoyo, Why I Choose African Spirituality. And I go into this, there's 4 presentations which I go into African spiritual concepts in terms of what is African spirituality and why we consider it to be a unified whole. Yeah. And then we go into who or what is God. Yeah. So a lot of the stuff that I've just dealt with here, we go into there. Yeah, my wife popped down. My phone, can you me? I'm gonna wrap up right now. Still, this is my last statement. Yeah, I'm gonna wrap up right now. Can everybody hear? Someone let me know if you can hear me, please, before I continue. But I'm wrapping up right now. Still. Okay, good. All right. So yeah. So like I said, as I was saying, I hope everyone's got something from that. And again, we end as I did yesterday, in the spirit of Pan-African unity. And I hope that ones can understand from the perspective of the African spirituals and African culturists how these concepts are linked to the idea of Pan-African objectives, yeah, universal African nationalist objectives. That the idea that if we understand ourselves culturally, the cultural unity of African people, that cultural unity can and will translate into political power, economic power, social power, yeah, and these things, kings and queens. All right, and so that is the perspective that I want to approach this conversation with. And the fact is that because of our relationship with Abrahamic religions, yeah, we have done harm to ourselves and the memories and the spirits of our ancestors because we have condemned them. And in our condemnation of our ancestors, we have caused division among ourselves. And so it requires at least some of us to restore dignity to our ancestors, to mend that breach, yeah, in the consciousness of African people. And we cannot mend that breach in the consciousness of African people if we don't address the issue of our spiritual systems, African-centered spiritual systems, kings and queens. And so I thank you for listening. And if you have any more questions or insights, please type it in the chat. Check out the Kimoyo African-centered, why I choose African spirituality series in the description. And I think I was explaining that the last two videos deal with the spirits or the forces of nature, and also ancestor veneration. And then the last video deals with the concept of the self. Yeah, how African spiritual systems can be utilized in terms of developing us as individuals and collectives, and also how that all relates into the ultimate goal of nation building, nationhood, and Pan-African political and economic development. So, Tendai Mwari, Mwane Makulukulu, give praises unto our great ancestors. Sorry, Tendai Mwari, be thankful unto the Mother, Father, Creator of the universe. Mwane Makulukulu. The Creator is the greatest above all greats. Kudzai Mudzimo Mokoro. Give praises unto our great ancestors. Mojuba Olumare. We give honor unto the divine, ultimate creative life force. Mojuba Orisha. We give honor to the forces of nature, the divine principles of nature. Mojuba Egungun, we give honor to our great ancestors. Nyankopon asaseyana nanum shrine. Nyankopon asaseyana nanum shrine. Nyankopon asaseyana nanum shrine. We give honor to the divine creator, divine Mother Earth, and the divine ancestors. And we ask them all to bless us. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.